Imagine opening a book that whispers your darkest fears and curses your very soul. This audiobook takes you deep into the terrifying reality of cursed texts, books that have driven real people to madness, despair, and death. Will you be brave enough to uncover their secrets, or will you risk becoming their next victim? Chapter 1. The Voynich Manuscript, the book no one can read. Hidden away in the archives of Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library lies a book that has baffled the world for centuries, the Voynich Manuscript. A codex of such strange beauty and unearthly complexity, it seems almost designed to drive any who dare to study it to the brink of madness. Its pages are filled with an alien language no one can read, written in an unknown script, and adorned with illustrations of bizarre plants, astrological symbols, and naked women entangled in incomprehensible rituals. It's as if the manuscript was not meant for human eyes. Perhaps, as many have come to believe, it was never meant to be read at all. Some say the manuscript is a message from another world. Others whisper that it holds the secrets of a forgotten, ancient power. And then there are those who believe the book itself is cursed, a trap for the mind, luring its victims deeper into an abyss of obsession, paranoia, and eventual madness. In 1912, an antiquarian bookseller named Wilfred Voynich discovered the manuscript in a collection of forgotten medieval texts in Italy. He was instantly captivated by its mystery, convinced it held the key to some lost knowledge. Voynich spent years trying to unlock its secrets, but the more he tried, the more he became consumed by it. Letters from his colleagues at the time reveal a man whose personality changed drastically. Once charming and sociable, Voynich became withdrawn, his mood darkening as the manuscript took hold of him. Friends reported that he began to suffer from insomnia, hearing whispers in the night as he pored over the pages. Voynich's obsession deepened until his death in 1930. He never made any progress in understanding the book, but, according to those close to him, he carried it with him everywhere, as if it held a spell over him. His last recorded words on the manuscript are chilling. It knows I am trying to understand. It is watching me. After Voynich's death, the manuscript was passed on to several researchers, each hoping to succeed where others had failed. World War II cryptographers, including those who had cracked Nazi codes, were assigned to decipher the book. These were some of the finest minds of their time, experts in breaking complex ciphers. Yet, none could make sense of the Voynich manuscript. One of the most notable cases was that of William Friedman, a brilliant cryptographer who led the team that deciphered Japan's Purple Code during the war. Fascinated by the manuscript's indecipherable language, Friedman spent nearly 3 decades trying to solve it. But the deeper he delved, the more it eluded him. Friedman's letters during his later years paint a disturbing picture. He became erratic, consumed by the manuscript's mysteries, often rambling incoherently about patterns he thought he saw but could never prove. He would speak of dreams where the words of the manuscript writhed and twisted before his eyes, forming and reforming into shapes that mocked him. His mental state deteriorated, and he suffered a severe breakdown in the 1950s. Some who knew him blamed the Voynich manuscript, convinced that it had driven him to madness. Friedman's case is not unique. Many others who have tried to crack the code have reported similar experiences. Paranoia, insomnia, and a creeping sense of dread seem to accompany prolonged study of the book. Some scholars have even described feeling as though the manuscript was studying them, its gaze unwavering, malevolent. In 1985, a young scholar named Robert Stafford, obsessed with cryptography and ancient languages, became captivated by the Voynich manuscript. Stafford was known for his brilliant mind, but also for his eccentricity. He often spoke of finding the hidden keys of the universe, a phrase that unnerved his colleagues. When he first laid eyes on the manuscript, he believed he had found his life's purpose. For months, Stafford worked in isolation, devoting himself entirely to deciphering the Voynich manuscript. His behavior became increasingly erratic. His notes, once meticulously organized, descended into chaotic scrawls of symbols and diagrams. He He began complaining of migraines, hallucinations, and vivid nightmares where strange figures from the manuscript's pages appeared before him, whispering incomprehensible messages. Then one night in late November, Robert Stafford disappeared. His apartment was found in complete disarray, papers scattered everywhere, the Voynich Manuscript open on his desk, his chair overturned. The only clue left behind was a single phrase written in his own hand across the manuscript's margins. It speaks when you're not listening. Stafford was never seen again. Some speculate that he lost his grip on reality and wandered off into the wilderness, consumed by the madness of the book. Others suggest something darker, that the manuscript itself took him, pulling him into whatever otherworldly dimension it originates from. The eerie power of the Voynich Manuscript has not waned over the centuries. To this day, it remains undeciphered, untouched by the understanding of modern scholars and cryptographers alike. In 2018, a computer scientist named Dr. Alan Turing claimed to have made some headway in decoding the manuscript using artificial intelligence. But within weeks of announcing his findings, Dr. Turing abandoned the project, citing personal reasons. Close friends of his later revealed that he had been suffering from panic attacks and irrational fears, convinced that something from the manuscript was stalking him. There is a growing belief among some occultists that the Voynich Manuscript is not a book at all, but a prison, an artifact designed to trap knowledge too dangerous for the human mind to comprehend. The very act of trying to understand it, they argue, invites madness, as the mind breaks under the weight of its own limitations. As of today, no one has cracked the code of the Voynich Manuscript. Scholars, cryptographers, and linguists have all tried, only to fail, and sometimes lose their minds in the process. It remains an enigma, an unsolvable puzzle, and a warning. Perhaps the only lesson the manuscript has taught us is this: there are some things we are not meant to know. Some books are better left unread, their secrets hidden, their power contained. But the lure of forbidden knowledge is strong, and the Voynich Manuscript will continue to call out to those who dare to open it, those who are willing to risk losing not just their time, but their sanity. In the silence of the Voynich Library, the manuscript waits, patient and unyielding. Its pages, filled with alien script and twisted illustrations, remain as cryptic and as dangerous as ever. And as it has for centuries, it watches. Chapter 2. The Necronomicon, H.P. Lovecraft's fictional curse turned real. In 1924, H.P. Lovecraft, the master of cosmic horror, penned a story that would spawn one of the most infamous texts in literary history, the Necronomicon. Lovecraft presented it as a fictional book, supposedly written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazard, which contained forbidden knowledge so dark that reading it could drive a person insane. The text detailed secrets of the universe, ancient gods slumbering beneath the earth, and rituals capable of summoning horrors from beyond human comprehension. But what began as a piece of fiction soon escaped the boundaries of Lovecraft's imagination. Over the years, the Necronomicon took on a life of its own. Whispers began circulating, rumors of real versions of the book hidden in dusty libraries, forbidden occult bookstores, and private collections. There were those who believed the Necronomicon wasn't fiction at all, but a real, cursed tome masquerading as fantasy. And many who sought it out discovered too late that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Simon Green was a quiet, introverted man with an insatiable appetite for the arcane. He'd grown up on Lovecraft's works, his young mind captivated by the universe of eldritch horrors. As an adult, Green delved deep into occult studies, collecting ancient grimoires and obscure texts. But there was one book that always eluded him, the Necronomicon. His friends dismissed it as a fantasy, just another creation from the fertile mind of Lovecraft. But Green was convinced otherwise. He became obsessed, combing through every obscure reference to the Necronomicon he could find. He traveled to antiquarian bookstores, scoured online forums, and even began corresponding with other occult enthusiasts who whispered of its existence. His life became consumed by the search. One day, he received a package. It contained a battered, leather-bound book with no title, sent from an anonymous address in New Orleans. Green tore it open, his heart racing. The book's pages were filled with strange symbols, diagrams, and invocations written in an archaic, near incomprehensible script. The final page simply read, "The Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon." From the moment Green began to read it, his life spiraled into a nightmare. He described hearing whispers when no one else was around, voices chanting in the darkness. His once tidy apartment became a chaotic shrine to the book, its pages filled with his frantic scribblings and interpretations of the cursed text. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, and he began to talk of visions, shadows with too many eyes, impossible geometries that bent the mind, and the looming presence of something ancient watching from just beyond the veil. One night, after weeks of isolation, Green vanished. His apartment was found in shambles, the walls covered in incomprehensible symbols drawn in what looked like blood. The book he had received lay open on the floor, but the final page, the one bearing the name of the Necronomicon, was missing. Simon Green was never seen again, and those who dared enter his apartment spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread that lingered, as if the space had been touched by something not of this world. Richard Tanner, a professor of occult studies at a small university in Massachusetts, was one of the few academics who dared to entertain the possibility that the Necronomicon might exist. He had long been fascinated by Lovecraft's mythos, and over the years, he began to receive letters from individuals claiming to possess real versions of the book. Most were hoaxes, but one package, sent by a reclusive collector in Eastern Europe, caught Tanner's attention. The book inside was bound in dark, worn leather, and emanated an aura of age and decay. The script within was in Arabic, but not the familiar, readable form. Tanner spent months trying to translate the symbols, and as he did, something within him changed. Colleagues noticed his health deteriorating. His eyes became bloodshot, his skin pale, and he began to suffer from terrible nightmares. He confided in a close friend that he'd been hearing voices, faint whispers that seemed to come from the book itself. Tanner grew obsessed, convinced that he had found something ancient, something that predated Lovecraft's stories. He claimed that the book was a window to another dimension, one filled with malevolent entities. His notes, once academic and logical, became erratic, filled with paranoid ravings about the old ones, gateways, and rituals to prevent their awakening. One morning, Tanner was found dead in his office. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a single, cryptic note. "I have seen them. They are real, and they are coming." His death was ruled a suicide, but those who knew him believed the book had driven him mad. The leather-bound tome disappeared from his office shortly after his death, its whereabouts unknown to this day. Throughout the decades, there have been numerous reports of individuals attempting to use the Necronomicon, or what they believe to be versions of it, to perform dark rituals. One such incident occurred in 1977 in a remote cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, where a group of amateur occultists gathered to perform a summoning ritual described in an alleged copy of the Necronomicon. According to surviving members of the group, they had been studying the book for months and had meticulously prepared the ritual to summon an entity they called Nyarlathotep, a name plucked straight from Lovecraft's mythos. What they expected to be an intellectual experiment quickly turned into a night of terror. The group claimed that as they chanted the incantations from the book, the air grew thick and oppressive. The temperature in the cabin plummeted, and the shadows seemed to writhe and shift unnaturally. The candles they had lit flickered out, and one member reported seeing a figure standing at the edge of the circle they had drawn, a figure with too many limbs and a face that defied description. The air was filled with a low, guttural sound, like the grinding of stone against bone. Panicking, the group abandoned the ritual and fled the cabin. When they returned the next morning, they found the place ransacked, as if something had torn through it in a violent frenzy. One member of the group, who had stayed behind, was found dead, his body twisted in an unnatural position, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. The copy of the Necronomicon they had used was nowhere to be found. The stories surrounding the Necronomicon, both fictional and real, paint a grim picture of obsession, madness, and death. What started as a product of Lovecraft's imagination has, over the years, manifested in terrifying ways. Whether the Necronomicon is merely a myth or something far more dangerous, the allure of its forbidden knowledge continues to ensnare those who seek it. But perhaps the greatest horror lies not in the contents of the book, but in the very act of seeking it. For those who have pursued its mysteries, the line between fiction and reality has blurred, and many have paid the ultimate price for their curiosity. As Lovecraft himself once wrote, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die." Perhaps the Necronomicon is best left a mystery, one that no mortal mind should ever attempt to unravel. Chapter 3. The Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible and its Curse. The Codex Gigas is not just any medieval manuscript. It looms over the world of ancient texts, a massive tome of 620 pages. Weighing nearly 165 pounds, it is said to be so large that 2 people are required just to lift it. But the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, as it has come to be known, harbors more than just its ominous size. It is shrouded in a dark legend, whispered across centuries, a tale that insists it was written in a single night, aided by the hand of the devil himself. The legend alone is enough to unnerve even the bravest souls. But what truly cements its cursed reputation are the strange and terrifying events that seem to follow anyone who dares to come too close to the book. Supernatural occurrences, inexplicable deaths, and creeping madness have all been reported by those who have interacted with the Codex Gigas. Some believe the book is haunted, while others suspect the curse of the devil still lingers within its pages, a silent predator waiting to claim new victims. The story begins in the early 13th century in a Benedictine monastery in what is now the Czech Republic. According to legend, a monk had committed a grave sin, one so severe that he was sentenced to be walled up alive as punishment. Desperate to avoid his doom, the monk made a deal with his superiors. He promised to write a book that would glorify the monastery, containing all known knowledge of the world, and finish it in one single night. His life, he claimed, would be spared if he succeeded. As midnight approached, the monk realized the enormity of his task. There was no possible way he could complete the manuscript by morning. In his desperation, he turned to the only force he believed could help, the devil. In exchange for his soul, the devil agreed to assist him, and by dawn, the book was complete. At the heart of the Codex Gigas is an unnerving full-page portrait of the devil, its haunting eyes staring out from the page, as if watching anyone who dares to linger too long. While this tale may be dismissed as mere folklore, the terrifying events that have unfolded since its creation make it difficult to ignore the possibility that the monk's pact may have left the Codex Gigas stained with something far more sinister. The Codex Gigas has changed hands many times over the centuries, but one of its most infamous owners was Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire. Rudolph was a collector of all things dark and arcane, a man obsessed with the occult. He was drawn to the book's reputation, believing that it might hold the key to unlocking forbidden knowledge. After acquiring the Codex Gigas, Rudolph began to act erratically. His advisors noted that he spent long hours alone with the book, often staring at the devil's portrait for hours on end. His once sharp mind became clouded, and he descended into paranoia, convinced that unseen forces were conspiring against him. His reign grew increasingly unstable, and whispers of madness began to circulate around the royal court. Rudolph's downfall was swift and brutal. In 1611, he was deposed and died soon after, his mind shattered and his empire in ruins. The Codex Gigas was taken from his possession, but the curse did not end with him. Several of his successors, drawn to the book's dark allure, also met mysterious and untimely deaths. Some scholars believe the Codex Gigas cursed the Habsburg dynasty itself, marking the beginning of their slow decline. In 1648, during the 30 Years' War, the Codex Gigas was seized by Swedish forces and transported to the Royal Library in Stockholm, where it remains to this day. But the move did not bring peace to those who sought to control it. In the early 1800s, Carl Gustav Liljekrantz, a Swedish historian, was given permission to study the Codex Gigas. He was fascinated by its size and legend, and spent weeks poring over the text, trying to uncover its secrets. But his fascination soon turned to obsession. Liljenkrantz's colleagues noted a change in his demeanor. Once a rational and composed man, he became reclusive, agitated, and increasingly paranoid. Liljenkranz claimed that the book was haunted, that he could hear whispers emanating from its pages, voices speaking in a language he did not understand. He became convinced that the book was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. Overcome by dread, Liljenkranz abruptly abandoned his research and left Stockholm. Shortly after, he died under mysterious circumstances. Some say he took his own life, driven mad by whatever presence lurked within the Codex Gigas. Others whisper that he was claimed by the same dark force that had aided the monks centuries before. To this day, those who work in the Royal National Library report seeing strange things in the room where the Codex Gigas is kept. Shadows that move when no one is there, books that fall from shelves without reason, and the distinct feeling of being watched by something unseen. Several staff members have refused to enter the room alone, and many believe that Liljenkrantz's spirit still haunts the library, trapped by the same curse that consumed him. In 1970, Father Lucius, a Catholic priest and historian, was given rare access to the Codex Gigas for a research project on medieval manuscripts. He approached the text with caution, aware of the dark legends surrounding it, but he dismissed the stories as superstition. Father Lucius's initial reports were calm and academic, but as the weeks wore on, his letters to his colleagues became more frantic. He wrote of nightmares, vivid dreams in which the devil from the Codex Gigas would visit him, its eyes glowing red, its voice promising him knowledge if he would only continue reading. The priest began to experience bouts of unexplained nausea, dizziness, and an overwhelming sense of despair whenever he was near the book. One evening, Father Lucius collapsed in his study. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors struggled to explain the sudden onset of his illness. He was incoherent, babbling about the devil and claiming that the book had shown him something. He died 2 days later, his final words a whispered plea: "Burn it." Father Lucius's death was ruled as natural causes, but those who had known him were unconvinced. They believed that the Codex Gigas had claimed yet another victim, seduced by its promise of knowledge, only to be consumed by its curse. The Codex Gigas remains in Stockholm, where it is kept under strict security. But those who have been near it claim that the portrait of the devil at its center exerts a strange power. Many have reported feeling an intense chill when they look into its eyes, a sensation of being drawn into the page, as if the devil himself is watching from beyond the parchment. Some say that the curse is still alive, waiting for the next victim to open its pages and succumb to the madness it promises. The Codex Gigas, a book written with the help of the devil, continues to haunt those who seek to unravel its dark mysteries. And in the silence of the library, the devil waits, his eyes gleaming from the ancient manuscript, as patient as ever. Chapter 4. The Book of Soiga, the deadly mystery of John Dee's lost text. The Book of Soiga is no ordinary manuscript. It is an ancient text of mysterious origin, said to hold the keys to unlocking forbidden knowledge, knowledge that comes at an unspeakable price. For centuries, its pages remained hidden, lost to time, until it resurfaced like a malevolent force, whispering its secrets to those reckless enough to seek them. Among its victims was John Dee, the renowned Elizabethan scholar, mathematician, astrologer, and occultist, whose obsession with the book left a chilling legacy. In the 16th century, John Dee was a man of profound intellect, revered in the courts of Queen Elizabeth I as a visionary. His interests, however, extended far beyond the natural sciences and into the shadowy realms of the occult. Among Dee's most prized possessions was the Book of Soiga, a cryptic manuscript filled with indecipherable ciphers, arcane diagrams, and lists of names and words that seemed to defy linguistic explanation. What troubled Dee most was that he could not read it. He believed the book contained a great truth, something beyond the reach of mortal understanding, a divine language or secret knowledge from the angelic realm. He was not wrong. The deeper Dee delved into its pages, the more it seemed the book was alive, speaking to him in whispers that echoed through his dreams. Night after night, he saw visions of death and darkness. His obsession grew, consuming him, driving him to contact spirits through scrying and other occult means. One entity, a spirit that called itself Uriel, claimed to know the secrets of the book. Uriel warned Dee that the knowledge in the Book of Soiga was forbidden, meant only for angels or demons, and that no human should ever attempt to comprehend it. Dee, however, was undeterred. He believed the book held the key to eternal life, a secret that would grant him power beyond this world. But in pursuing that power, he unwittingly sealed his fate. After years of cryptic studies and futile attempts to decode the text, Dee's health declined, his mind unraveling in the process. By the time he died in 1609, he had become a shadow of the brilliant man he once was, haunted by the dark knowledge he had sought to uncover. When Dee died, the Book of Soiga vanished. Many believed it had been destroyed, perhaps even claimed by the spirits he had summoned. But the truth was far more terrifying. For centuries, the Book of Soiga was nothing more than a ghost in the annals of history, a footnote in the bizarre life of John Dee. That changed in 1994 when 2 copies of the manuscript were unearthed in the British Library and the Bodleian Library in Oxford. The rediscovery sent shockwaves through the scholarly world, especially among occultists and cryptographers. The mysterious book, with its ominous history and undeciphered content, beckoned to those with a dangerous curiosity. Dr. Martin Fenton, a well-respected historian specializing in Renaissance magic, was among the first to study the Book of Soiga after its rediscovery. He had read about Dee's obsession and saw the book as a challenge, something he could crack with his knowledge of ancient languages and ciphers. For weeks, he pored over its pages, deciphering symbols, analyzing the cryptic texts, and making notes. Yet, the deeper he went, the more unnerving his experiences became. Fenton reported strange occurrences during his study sessions, books moving by themselves, shadows that seemed to shift and grow in the dim light of his study. At first, he dismissed these as tricks of the mind, symptoms of exhaustion. But the dreams were harder to explain. Every night, he dreamed of a faceless figure draped in a tattered black cloak, standing at the foot of his bed, silently watching him. Sometimes, the figure would whisper, though Fenton could never remember the words upon waking. Other nights, he saw visions of a crumbling tomb, with his name etched into the cold stone. His obsession with the book intensified. His friends and colleagues noticed his erratic behavior, the paranoia that crept into his speech. He became isolated, shunning company and spending hours locked in his study with the Book of Soiga open before him. He confided in a close colleague that he believed the book was speaking to him, telling him things that no human should ever know. One morning, after weeks of seclusion, Fenton's body was found in his study. He had died of a heart attack, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. His death was ruled natural, but those who knew him believed otherwise. Scattered around his lifeless body were pages from the Book of Soiga, filled with frantic scribbles and half-completed translations. His final note, written in shaky handwriting, simply read, "The book is cursed." Dr. Fenton was not the only one to fall under the book's deadly spell. After his death, several other scholars took up the challenge of deciphering the Book of Soiga, eager to unlock its secrets. But each one met a similar fate: mental instability, horrific nightmares, and in some cases, untimely deaths. One such case was that of Professor Eleanor Hayes, a renowned cryptographer who had previously cracked some of the world's most complex codes. Hayes approached the book with confidence, believing she could succeed where others had failed. But like those before her, she quickly found herself spiraling into obsession. Her once meticulous notes became scrawled with desperate, incoherent phrases. "It watches me. I can't sleep. The shadows are alive." Hayes became convinced that something malevolent was following her. She spoke of dark figures lurking in her peripheral vision, growing closer with each passing day. Her nights were plagued by visions of death, graves yawning open, skeletal hands pulling her into the earth, and the overwhelming presence of something vast and ancient, whispering her name. In her final days, she barricaded herself in her apartment, refusing to speak to anyone. Her neighbors reported hearing her screaming at night, though no one dared to intervene. When she was finally found, she had taken her own life, her apartment in disarray. The Book of Soiga was open on her desk, its pages marked with strange symbols drawn in her own blood. At the heart of the Book of Soiga lies its most terrifying mystery, the series of cryptic tables that fill its final pages. These tables are made up of seemingly random letters arranged in grids, and for centuries, they have resisted all attempts at decipherment. Some believe these tables hold the key to eternal life, while others fear they are invocations meant to summon forces beyond human understanding. What is certain is that those who fixate on the tables often meet a grisly end. Scholars who attempt to decode them report feelings of unease, as if the letters themselves are alive, shifting when they look away. Many have described an overwhelming sense of being watched, as if something malevolent is waiting for them to unlock the code. None who have tried have succeeded, and those who persist are driven to madness. The Book of Soiga remains a deadly enigma, a cursed relic that continues to claim victims. Its pages, dark and foreboding, whisper of knowledge no mortal should possess. And those who seek its secrets do so at their own peril, for the book demands a price far greater than they could ever imagine. Chapter 5. The Grand Grimoire, a manual for summoning demons. The Grand Grimoire, a book spoken of in whispers, hidden in shadow, and said to hold the power to command the forces of hell itself. Many call it the Red Dragon, but its true name stirs fear in those who understand its dark promises. The Grand Grimoire is not merely a text. It is a pact, an agreement between human will and the abyss. Those who dared to open its cursed pages believed they could control the infernal forces trapped within its ancient words. But the reality was far worse than they ever imagined. They sought power but found madness. They called upon demons, and the demons answered. The legend of the Grand Grimoire stretches back centuries, with its origins shrouded in mystery. Some say it was written in the 16th century. Others claim it is far older, possibly penned by a sorcerer under demonic possession. What is certain is that the book outlines a series of dark rituals with one terrifying goal: to summon Lucifer himself and force him into servitude. It is a recipe for unimaginable power, one that has tempted many over the years, most of whom met grisly fates. One of the earliest recorded accounts of someone attempting to use the Grand Grimoire comes from 18th century France. The notorious occultist Antoine Renaud, whose name has long since faded into legend, was said to have acquired a copy of the forbidden book. Renaud had become obsessed with the idea of controlling demons. His journals, which still exist today, paint a picture of a man slowly losing grip on his sanity. The deeper he delved into the book's rituals, the more erratic and violent his behavior became. Neighbors reported hearing strange, inhuman voices echoing from his home late at night. Some claimed to have seen shadows moving unnaturally behind his windows. Renaud's final act was his most chilling. On a stormy night, he barricaded himself in his cellar, armed with only the Grand Grimoire and a series of occult tools. He was determined to summon a demon known as Lucifuge Roficale, one of the dark princes of hell. When morning came, the door was broken down by concerned locals. They found Renaud's body twisted and contorted, as though he had been attacked by something unseen. His eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. On the stone floor of the cellar was a grotesque sigil, drawn in blood, its meaning clear to those familiar with demonology. He had succeeded in summoning something, and it had taken him. Centuries later, the curse of the Grand Grimoire crossed the Atlantic. In the 1970s, a young man named Michael was drawn into the world of the occult. By all accounts, Michael was a rational and intelligent man, but his interest in dark magic spiraled into obsession after he stumbled upon a translated version of the Grand Grimoire at a rare bookshop in New Orleans. The book captivated him in a way nothing else ever had. It whispered promises of wealth, power, and control. He could not resist. Michael's friends noticed the change in him almost immediately. Once warm and jovial, he became withdrawn and irritable. His apartment, once a lively hub for gatherings, became a darkened sanctuary. Visitors described the place as cold, as if the very air had turned malevolent. Candles burned at all hours, strange symbols were drawn on the walls, and the Grand Grimoire lay open on a makeshift altar. Then came the night Michael attempted the ritual. According to his closest friend, Daniel, Michael had spoken for weeks about a particular summoning outline in the Grand Grimoire. He believed he could control a powerful demon that would grant him whatever he desired. Despite Daniel's pleas, Michael went ahead with the ritual, alone. The next morning, when Daniel arrived at Michael's apartment, he found the door ajar. Inside was chaos, furniture overturned, deep gashes carved into the walls, and the overpowering stench of sulfur. Michael was nowhere to be found. All that remained was the Grand Grimoire, lying open on the floor, its pages smeared with what appeared to be blood. To this day, Michael's disappearance remains unsolved, though rumors persist that he was taken, claimed by the very entity he had tried to summon. Not all who used the Grand Grimoire sought to summon demons for power. In 1998, in Haiti, a group of men, driven by desperation and poverty, turned to the book in an attempt to summon Baron Samedi, the Loa of death and resurrection in Haitian Vodou. Believing that the Grand Grimoire could provide the means to resurrect their recently deceased leader, they followed the book's dark rituals to the letter. What followed was a series of events so horrifying, they would forever be seared into the minds of the surviving participants. The ritual was held in an abandoned sugar mill, where the men gathered around the body of their leader, reciting incantations from the Grand Grimoire by flickering candlelight. As the chants grew louder, a powerful wind surged through the mill, snuffing out the candles and plunging the room into pitch darkness. Witnesses later described hearing a deep, guttural laugh that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When the lights were restored, the body on the table was gone. In its place, something else stood, something tall, shadowy, and unmistakably inhuman. The creature's eyes glowed like burning coals, and its grin stretched impossibly wide. One of the men, paralyzed by fear, claimed to have heard the voice of their leader whispering from the darkness, "You should have left me to rest." None of the participants survived the night. Their bodies were discovered the next day, mutilated beyond recognition, and scattered across the mill. The Grand Grimoire was found, open and undamaged, at the center of the ritual circle, as if untouched by the chaos around it. There are countless other tales, whispers of people driven mad by their contact with the Grand Grimoire. Scholars who, after years of research, lost their minds and began speaking in tongues. Occultists who vanished without a trace. Those who dared to summon demons, only to be destroyed by the very forces they sought to control. The allure of the Grand Grimoire remains strong, even today. Copies of the book are still sought by those who believe they can harness its power. But those who have tried, those who have dared to read the incantations aloud, know that the price is steep, and the demons are always watching, waiting for the next fool to call their name. For the Grand Grimoire is not just a book, it is a contract. And when you open its pages, you are no longer in control. You are merely a pawn in a game played by forces far darker, far older than anything you could ever imagine. And once they are summoned, they never truly leave. Chapter 6, The Rohan Codex, Madness in the Search for Meaning. The Rohan Codex is not just a book, it is a black hole that has devoured minds for centuries. With its cryptic symbols and strange, undecipherable script, it lures in the curious, the obsessed, and those who think they can uncover its secrets. But what lies within its pages is more than just an intellectual challenge. The Rohan Codex holds a curse of madness, dragging those who study it into the depths of their own unraveling minds, consuming them until there is nothing left but despair, madness, and death. No one knows who wrote the Rohan Codex. Theories have been spun for hundreds of years. Some claim it is an elaborate hoax, while others argue it's an ancient religious text, a hidden cipher, or the work of an alien intelligence. But those who have spent years poring over its indecipherable script, seeking patterns where there are none, have paid a terrible price. Their obsession has not led to understanding, but to madness. One of the earliest modern cases of Voynich Codex obsession occurred in the late 19th century with Hungarian scholar Professor Zoltán Varga. Varga was a linguist who believed he had a unique insight into cracking the code hidden within the mysterious symbols of the Voynich Codex. For years, he pored over the ancient pages, filling notebook after notebook with his attempts at translation. What began as a passionate academic pursuit soon turned into an all-consuming obsession. Varga's colleagues noticed his slow descent into madness long before he did. Once a respected figure in the field of linguistics, Varga became increasingly paranoid. He began to believe that shadowy figures were watching him, seeking to steal his work. He spoke of the Codex as if it were alive, as if it had some dark intelligence that was deliberately hiding its secrets from him. He isolated himself, refusing to leave his study, which had become a chaotic shrine to the Voynich Codex. The walls were covered in frenzied notes and indecipherable scribbles. His health deteriorated as he refused to eat or sleep, claiming that the Codex would reveal its secrets to him if he just persevered a little longer. Then, one night, Varga disappeared. His study was found in complete disarray, papers scattered everywhere, books torn apart. The Voynich Codex lay open on his desk, its cryptic symbols mocking his failure. Varga's body was discovered 3 days later at the bottom of a nearby river, his face frozen in a grimace of terror. Though the official cause of death was listed as drowning, whispers circulated that the Codex had driven him to suicide or something worse. Agnes Verez, a Hungarian cryptographer in the early 20th century, was one of the few women of her time to be involved in the world of cryptography. Her work brought her in contact with the Voynich Codex, and like many before her, she became ensnared by its mysteries. Verez was drawn to the text by a belief that she could uncover what so many before her had failed to. She was confident, perhaps too confident. For the first year, Verez's work was methodical, scholarly. She approached the Codex with patience and discipline, applying the tools of cryptography with precision. But then something changed. Her research began to dominate her life. She withdrew from her friends, stopped attending academic conferences, and ignored the letters of concerned colleagues. Those who knew Verez described a gradual but unmistakable transformation. Her once bright and inquisitive eyes became dull, haunted by the symbols that seemed to swirl in her mind, day and night. She began seeing patterns in everything, patterns that led nowhere. The Voynich Codex had wormed its way into her mind, infecting her thoughts, her dreams. She started hearing whispers at night, voices telling her that the answers were just within reach, if only she could give a little more of herself. Verez's notes from this period are incomprehensible, filled with nonsensical equations, bizarre drawings, and erratic handwriting. She scribbled messages about the Codex speaking to her, warning her, demanding from her. Her family found her one evening, catatonic, staring blankly at the open book. In her final days, she repeated only one phrase: "The words are alive." Verez was committed to an asylum, where she remained until her death in 1935, her mind shattered beyond repair. Peter Kovacs was a renowned cryptographer in the 1950s, highly respected for his breakthroughs in code breaking during World War II. But his illustrious career took a dark turn when he became obsessed with the Voynich Codex. Kovacs was known for his unyielding intellect, his ability to crack even the most complex ciphers. The Codex was a challenge he couldn't resist. Like many before him, Kovacs approached the Voynich Codex with scientific rigor. He spent months analyzing its structure, searching for patterns in the strange symbols and unusual page layouts. But as the months stretched into years, Kovacs grew increasingly desperate. His friends and colleagues noticed his obsession taking a toll. He became reclusive, secretive, and began showing signs of erratic behavior. He spoke of strange dreams and shadowy figures that haunted him, as if something had attached itself to him during his studies. Kovacs' obsession with the Codex deepened until he could no longer distinguish between reality and the symbols on the page. His once brilliant mind was consumed by the patterns and ciphers that led to madness instead of revelation. In his final letter, sent to a close colleague just days before his disappearance, Kovacs wrote of visions of the end and the curse woven into the ink of the codex. Shortly after sending that letter, Kovacs vanished. No body was ever found, and his disappearance remains a mystery to this day. Some say the Voynich Codex claimed him, pulling him into the very void he sought to understand. To this day, the Voynich Codex remains undeciphered, a puzzle without a solution. Those who have tried to unravel its mysteries speak of sleepless nights, nightmares, and an inexplicable pull to keep reading, keep searching, until their minds can take no more. Scholars who once approached the Codex as a scholarly pursuit have abandoned it in fear, unwilling to risk their sanity for answers that may never come. The Voynich Codex is more than a riddle. It is a curse, a trap that ensnares those who think they can conquer it. And those who fall into its depths are never the same again. Chapter 7, The Maleficium, The Witch's Curse and Its Victims. There are books that whisper, texts filled with incantations, rituals, and promises of dark power. They are called Maleficium, grimoires of black magic said to channel the very essence of evil. These books, hidden in the shadows of history, are believed to carry a curse. Those who seek their knowledge often pay with more than they ever bargained for. Deaths, accidents, madness. These are not coincidences, but echoes of the witch's curse etched into every page. The stories in this chapter are not myth. They are not legend. They are real, documented accounts of people who, whether out of greed, curiosity, or desperation, touched these forbidden books and were touched back. In 1645, during the height of the European witch trials, Father Sebastian Artois was a zealous priest in northern France. Known for his fierce stance against witchcraft, he led countless witch hunts, taking great pleasure in burning accused women at the stake. He believed he was doing God's work, until the day he found a book, half buried beneath the scorched remains of a hanged woman's home. It was a Maleficium, its cover blackened and burned, but still intact. Father Sebastian took the book as a trophy, a symbol of his victory over the devil's servants. But as he began to study its contents, something shifted. The Latin phrases, the strange symbols began to haunt him. At first, he laughed off the unease, but soon his dreams were invaded by horrific visions. Women with hollow eyes whispering curses, flames devouring him as dark figures watched from the shadows. Within a month, his strong, booming voice became a mere whisper. He claimed the witches were watching him, following him. His once unshakable faith crumbled as he fell into a paranoid frenzy. Father Sebastian shut himself inside his quarters, feverishly poring over the Maleficium, trying to find a way to reverse the curse he now believed had been placed on him. Witnesses described hearing him mutter prayers and curses in the dead of night, his voice distorted, like something was speaking through him. On the final night of his life, the church was shaken by his blood-curdling screams. When the other priests broke down the door, they found him hanging from the rafters, his eyes wide open, lips frozen in a grotesque grin. The Maleficium was clutched in his cold, dead hands. Those who saw his face claimed it wasn't fear they saw in his expression, it was madness. In 1897, Amelia Price inherited a peculiar library from her eccentric uncle, a known dabbler in the occult. Among the rare volumes, one book stood out, a tattered Maleficium, filled with strange illustrations and spells that her uncle had warned her never to touch. Amelia was a practical woman, dismissive of superstition and curious by nature. Ignoring her uncle's warnings, she began reading it late at night by candlelight. For weeks, nothing happened, but slowly, Amelia began to feel watched. Strange accidents started to plague her estate. Her maid fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Her horses went wild in the stable, trampling each other in a frenzy. The very air seemed to thicken with an unnatural energy, as if the house itself was suffocating. One night, while reading a particularly disturbing passage about summoning spirits of the dead, Amelia's candle flickered out. She swore she saw a figure in the reflection of the window, tall, dark, with hollow eyes. From that moment, her mind unraveled. She heard whispers from every corner of the room, her uncle's voice telling her she was damned, that the book had cursed her. Amelia's servants found her days later, locked in her library, surrounded by the remnants of torn pages, her once beautiful face twisted in terror. Her hands were bloodied, as if she had clawed at the walls in desperation. The book, though damaged, was still there, untouched by the chaos around her. It was said that her last words, spoken in a trembling voice to the butler who discovered her, were, "It won't let me go." Peter Harrington was a man of wealth and refined taste, a collector of rare books who prided himself on possessing the world's most unique and forbidden texts. In 1974, Harrington acquired what he believed to be an original Maleficium from an obscure antiquarian in Romania. This Maleficium, however, was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its cover was made of what he swore was human skin, and its pages were brittle with age, yet disturbingly warm to the touch. Despite warnings from the seller that this particular book was cursed, Harrington eagerly added it to his collection. That night, he began to experience an unshakable dread. His grand mansion, once a place of comfort, became a labyrinth of shadows. He heard footsteps in the corridors when no one was there. His prized possessions began to fall from their shelves, as if pushed by invisible hands. His descent into madness was rapid. He became convinced that something had come with the book, an entity that watched him, waited for him. His butler reported seeing Harrington standing in front of the fireplace, talking to no one, his voice low and terrified. He would wake up screaming, covered in scratches that he couldn't explain. Within a month, Harrington's behavior became erratic. He destroyed most of his collection, convinced that the other books had become vessels for the dark force that plagued him. But the Maleficium, he couldn't bring himself to burn it. He feared that destroying it would unleash something even worse. Harrington's body was discovered after a violent storm. His housekeeper found him in the library, the Maleficium open on his lap. His neck had been snapped, as if by an unseen hand. The coroner's report listed his death as accidental, but those close to him believed otherwise. The Maleficium had claimed yet another soul. Throughout history, the Maleficium has surfaced in strange, obscure ways, always attached to stories of tragedy, madness, and death. These grimoires are not just books. They are conduits for something dark, something ancient that refuses to be silenced. Those who touch them are forever marked, their lives altered in ways they can never fully comprehend until it is too late. The curse of the Maleficium is not in the words themselves, but in the act of seeking them out, of daring to understand powers not meant for human minds. Perhaps, in the end, it is not the magic within the pages that kills. It is the price of curiosity. Those who possess a Maleficium do not possess the book. The book possesses them. Even now, hidden in the shadows, the Maleficium waits. Its pages whisper to those who are willing to listen, and its curse remains as potent as ever, biding its time, ready to claim its next victim. Have you ever encountered a book that whispered dark secrets in the dead of night, leaving you trembling in fear? Share your haunting experiences with us in the comments. Remember, in this realm of shadows, your story might be the next to awaken something sinister. Stay vigilant. They are always listening.